Hi you guys, welcome back to C-Squad Cinema, a compendium for physical media, film reviews, rambles, and other nerdy movie talk. I have to say I was really excited today because I noticed I got a comment on one of my videos. It was the video I posted for the Wolfman 4K reviews. I really appreciate that because I know my channel's new and sometimes channels are slow to grow. So when I get on and I see a comment and 2 new subscribers, I got really excited. So for those of you joining me and choosing to subscribe, thank you. That means a lot, and the comment did too. And as you can see, I am adorned in Scarywood gear today. If you're not familiar with what Scarywood is, it's the Silverwood theme park in Athol, Idaho, which every year in the month of October becomes Scarywood. And of course, the whole place is done up all spooky. My wife and kids and I have been going for several years now, kind of an annual Halloween tradition for us, and the place is awesome. They do a really good job. I mean, as soon as you walk through the gates, I mean, the whole place is just eerie and spooky, and there's fog machines going everywhere, and it's dark, and there's dim, like, cool Halloween lighting. And different areas of the park are themed differently. So, you know, one area is like a haunted, demonic clown village with clowns hanging everywhere, and there's haunters walking around trying to scare the socks off of you. Some are dressed like serial killers or other spooky characters. And of course, other than the whole park being totally decked out for Halloween, some of the rides are open as well. There's even one roller coaster that goes backwards during Scarywood. And of course, their feature attractions is they have several big haunts. They have some good ones that come back every year. There's one for zombies and like this Pharaoh's tomb themed one. And then this year they have one called The Swine. Basically a big haunted corn maze with a bunch of demonic pig creatures running after you with chainsaws trying to eat your face. The feature one for me the last couple years has been the Blood Bayou, which is absolutely insane. They have some special effects and gore work inside of that haunt that to this day, I don't know how they pull it off. The makeup is so good. They have dead bodies set up that look like legit human corpses. It's insane. So in honor of my family's annual trip to Scarywood, I thought it would be really fun to come back home, sit down, and discuss 3 of my very favorite Halloween haunt-themed horror movies. And the first one, I'm sure you saw this coming, is Hellfest. Now, Hellfest is super underrated in my opinion, and I have to admit, this flew under the radar even for me when it came out in 2018. I missed the boat on this in the theater, and I kind of regret doing that because Hellfest is actually way better than you would think, and if you've seen it, I can guarantee you it's way better than you remember. So this was directed by Gregory Plotkin and written by Seth Sherwood. Now the premise is very simple. You know, a group of young college-age adults decide to go to Hellfest for Halloween. You know, basically a big, scary themed theme park. And it's not long before they start getting stalked and one by one killed by a mysterious masked man. So yeah, it's a familiar premise, but it's executed much better than average here. First of all, the screenplay by Seth Sherwood provides some pretty realistic dialogue, and the actors perform it quite well. I mean, the conversations they're having in the opening scenes of the movie sound like conversations you have at that age. And, you know, it's a bunch of unknowns. So it works in the movie's favor that this is a group of people that we can buy is a group of, you know, young college somethings. And the movie takes a little bit of time to establish each personality, and you get a sense of the relationships without them needing to do this big exposition dump. And it's really effective for what the movie's trying to accomplish. The main character is played by Amy Forsyth, who you might also recognize from the Channel Zero series, which aired on Shudder, is where I watched it. She was in season 2. She's a very good actress and very effective here as your final girl. But of course, what is any Halloween-themed horror film without its masked slasher? And Hellfest has a very good one. I think he's simply known as The Other, and he's just a patron that walks into the park, puts on a mask, and starts killing people. Now, the costuming for him is very simple. It's like a hoodie. Now, we're all familiar with the iconic killer masks in any number of other Halloween horror franchises, but I'd make an argument that the other mask is a contender for being pretty iconic. It's a pretty effective look, and what's really cool is you never see the killer's actual face. Now, that's something even Halloween didn't do with a reveal toward the end of the movie, and of course, Scream does it every movie. But that's what's great about Hellfest, is that you never see who this guy is. And the way that the movie ends, without spoiling it, it just raises so many questions, and there's so much potential for a really interesting sequel. And I'm kind of disappointed we haven't had it yet, because it just, like, where did this guy come from? Why is he doing this, especially considering this situation? It's a banger of an ending that, to my mind, is vastly underrated. And you know, some of the kills in this movie are actually really brutal and graphic. He kind of has to use the context of the environment to his advantage to get some pretty sneaky, gruesome kills in here. Of course, the premise is made a little bit more frightening because a lot of people in there are wearing masks. And so in a way, it's almost like you could see somebody maybe pulling this off, you know, before they get caught and eventually arrested, because there'd be evidence everywhere. But I jest. And what Hellfest has going for it is a really glorious cameo by the legendary Tony Todd. Yes, the Candyman himself, here performing as sort of a showman in this weird public execution display. It's a lot of fun, and you can tell he probably had a blast filming his scenes. Overall, Hellfest, super underrated. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I gotta say, this 4K is pretty substantial because of the HDR. Of course, with horror movies, you know, there's a lot of dark scenes, and so as far as the fine detail in the 4K that you would see above a Blu-ray, you might not notice that as much. What you absolutely will notice is the HDR grade on this movie. You know, there's a lot of lighting in this movie, like orange and purple, and there's green lasers shooting all around. And the Hellfest 4K does a really good job at making those colors pop, even starting in the opening scene. Hellfest, you guys, check it out, especially on 4K if you have it. Otherwise, Blu-ray looks great too, but Hellfest, super underrated slasher for this time of year. Now, next up, we have Haunt. Now, Haunt actually has some pretty substantial acclaim at this point. Haunt premiered on Shudder, and I know I watched it for the first time on Joe Bob Briggs' The Last Drive-In when he does the Halloween special. They showed Haunt, and I was blown away. So this is from 2019, written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the guys who wrote A Quiet Place. And guess what? The premise is about a young group of college friends that go to an extreme haunted house on Halloween night. And then, you'll never believe this, one by one, they are stalked and killed by masked strangers. Of course, that tried and true premise strikes again, but Haunt is super scary. It actually just really held my attention the first time I watched it. Again, a strength here is a really strong screenplay that doesn't do a bunch of exposition dumps. The main character, Harper, had, you know, an abusive dad and boyfriend, but rather than just tell us all that, we get these little hints and images that kind of show us what she's been experiencing. It establishes a strong sense of her character early on without saying too much, and that's a really smart choice. And we buy into the rest of the friendships as well. You know, each character, you know, has a pretty defined personality, which is really nice. You know, there's never a sense that, oh, who's that guy? Who's that guy? There's really clear lines between each of them, so that you get invested and you can kind of pick who your favorite character is based on their personality traits and how it aligns with yours. So what's really superb about Haunt is the way the tension is just steadily increased throughout the course of the movie. You know, it already starts in this really dark, foreboding mood because Harper has just clearly experienced something awful. And so she's already unsettled and sort of paranoid that, you know, ex-boyfriend might be around the next corner. So since we follow the majority of the movie through her perspective, you just have that sense of dread along with her. And it's a very effective starting point. Then they get out to the haunt, and of course things seem off because, it's out in the middle of nowhere. But what I really respect the movie for is because it's situated in this very specific location, an extreme haunt on Halloween night, that allows for the context of the movie to sort of close some of those trope holes that we often see. Character runs to the car and the car won't start very suddenly, or they don't have cell phone service. But this movie actually finds some very clever contextual reasons why they wouldn't even have their cell phones, or why they wouldn't be near their car. They go into what is essentially a derelict building that they're not familiar with. And I love that the screenplay gives these characters the agency to not just be complete screaming idiots when, this shit hits the fan. Their response to what is happening feels appropriate and realistic. I mean, even when things start going really crazy and they think they've seen one of their friends die, it's an extreme haunt. And if they're being told that's part of the show, you can see their mind sort of wrestle with what's real and what's just part of this extreme haunt. It's a really unique way to add to the tension because, of course, we as the audience know these things are not part of a haunt. No, these guys are actually out to get you. And so knowing that information before the characters do makes for this insanely nail-biting middle portion of the film. And the death scenes are just really intense. They're not like absurdly gory compared to a lot of stuff out there, but they're really graphic. But props to the editors of this movie, because when a kill happens, they kind of do a cutaway, but not until after you've already seen quite enough. But here's the kicker. This movie does such a good job of building that sense of desperation that at one point in the movie, we're almost rooting for someone we know is a bad dude to come in and save the day. The movie's done something right when a character that we're already supposed to hate, we're kind of rooting for to come in and save the day, but that doesn't happen. I won't say why it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen. Bottom line, the movie sets a great Halloween mood and atmosphere. This is something I watch every year now at this point. Minor criticism, I would say maybe they take the final girl thing one step a little too far. The ending is sort of, for impact and maybe to establish a sequel. But what's great is Haunt doesn't need a sequel. It's got a pretty definitive ending and a pretty rousing one, if you ask me. But it's a really good Halloween slasher, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Okay, and the last one I wanted to talk about really fast is Trick. This one just popped up on my radar last year, and I was pretty pleasantly surprised by this. This is a B-movie slasher that takes place over the course of several Halloweens and kind of has a very unique premise. So you follow this detective. He's essentially investigating this Halloween massacre committed by this guy that a bunch of people only know as Trick. And of course, they think they've identified who Trick is, and everybody thinks he's dead until the next Halloween, more people end up dead. And guess what? It's Trick. So the movie spans several years following Omar Epps as this detective as he's investigating this series of slasher murders over multiple Halloweens. And there's a late sequence in the movie that takes place at a really cool, spooky Halloween haunt, and the whole atmosphere of that location, they pull that off really well. It looks like a viable location where they just kind of stepped in and said, hey, can we film our movie here at your Halloween haunt? It's legit. They do a very good job. And the iconic Tom Atkins shows up as my favorite character in the whole film. There's elements of it that are a little hokey. I can see where they didn't quite pull off the premise as cleverly as they could, but for the most part, it's a pretty unique idea. Jamie Kennedy also pops up in here as this really creepy surgeon in the movie, but he brings it just like he does to the horror genre in general. But Trick is a lot of fun, and it makes for a great double or triple feature with either of these other movies that I've discussed today. Okay, well that's it for my Scarywood and Halloween haunt themed horror discussion. Stay tuned because next week I'll be dropping a video highlighting some of my favorite anthology horror movies to watch around the spooky season. And looking ahead to November, or as I like to call it, Noir-vember, I'm going to be discussing some of my favorite noir films. So this has been C Squad Cinema. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.